A conspiracy is always an interesting subject to cover when you're studying history. Just from hearing the word, it draws in a wide crowd of people that have a general interest in the subject, but it may be from something different, like a story in a book or a TV show, perhaps. But for those of you who don't know what a conspiracy would look like, let me give you an example. For instance, you may be developing a conspiracy to take your father's car and go to the movies, or attempt to use your international connections and support from a cabal of U.S. planters, politicians, and army officers to establish an independent country in the Southwestern United States and parts of Mexico. Yeah. Welcome to the story of the Burr Conspiracy. To begin our story, we need to look at a person that is the mastermind behind the conspiracy to create a new country within the New World, and his name is Aaron Burr. Born February 6, 1756 to Aaron Burr Sir and Esther Edwards Burr in Newark, New Jersey, Aaron had a regular but rocky start to his life. Being the son of the second president of Princeton University and the grandson to noted theologian Jonathan Edwards, his life was set for a good course of learning and academics. However, his father died when he was only 1, leaving him in the custody of his mother and grandfather, who both sadly died as well, leaving him and his little sister orphans when they were only 2. He would later be put into the custody of the William Shippen family in Philadelphia, and by 1759 the children's guardianship was assumed by their 21-year-old maternal uncle Timothy Edwards, though Timothy was not a good person to Aaron and was often physically abusive to him. However, things would change for the better when he was accepted into Princeton University as a sophomore and would receive his Bachelor's of Arts degree at age 16 and would continue to go to Princeton to study theology for another year. 3 years would pass and he would move to Connecticut to study law with his brother-in-law. However, in 1775, the first shots of the American Revolution had been fired, and seeing a new adventure on the horizon, he pushed his pencil and paper aside and went to fight in the Continental Army. He would spend 4 years fighting in the American Revolution and would see action at the battles of Quebec and Monmouth and would be promoted to lieutenant colonel. However, his military career would be cut short when he resigned from the army due to health issues, but he wasn't done helping with the war effort and would perform occasional intelligence missions for good old George Washington. He continued his studies in law, and when the war ended in American victory, he delved himself into the world of politics and would make friends with many of the founding fathers like George Clinton, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson. Burr would become the vice president to Thomas Jefferson when he was elected the 3rd president of the United States in 1801, and he did a pretty good job over his term as vice president. He received praise from some of his enemies with his even-handed fairness and his political manner as president of the Senate, and has been credited to preserve the principle of judicial independence that was established by the Marbury versus Madison case in 1803. However, Jefferson never trusted Burr, and he had a right to do so. By 1804, Burr was evidently replaced as vice president when Jefferson's re-election campaign began. His political career would spiral down from there, and after beating Alexander Hamilton in a duel on July 11, 1804, his political career officially ended. However, by the end of his career and even during his career, he began to develop a plan, a conspiracy, you could say, to take some parts of the Southwestern United States and create his own country. And to start it all off, we have to go back to his vice presidency. The United States had officially purchased the Louisiana Territory from the French back in 1803, and Burr saw an opportunity in this and would begin to persuade President Jefferson to appoint a man named James Wilkinson as governor of the Louisiana Territory. Now, he specifically chose Wilkinson because of 2 reasons. Number 1, back in the 1870s, Wilkinson attempted to separate Kentucky and Tennessee from the Union. Reason number 2, and the most important reason in my opinion, he was the commanding general of the United States Army at the time. Now, that's a big deal because Wilkinson had control over the entire United States military and could move out west without suspicion to cultivate alliances for Burr's conspiracy. It was the perfect plan, and Wilkinson would be appointed governor of the territory later in 1805. But these were only the first steps, as Burr wanted to get the British on board with his plan. By 1804, when Burr was still vice president to Thomas Jefferson, he began to meet with a man named Anthony Merry, the British minister to the United States. Their relationship initially kicked off in August in 1804 when Burr met with Merry and revealed to him his devilish plan and offered him a slice of his cake, namely the entire western territory of the United States. Mary was intrigued by this, and in the light of the American Revolution that essentially stripped control of their former colonies, this seemed like the best course of action, but their involvement would have to come at a cost. The British would have to provide guns and money, $500,000 to be exact, along with stationing a British fleet in the Gulf of Mexico. But Mary saw nothing wrong with this, and he would send word to his supervisors in Britain, putting in detail Burr's plan. However, the British showed little interest in his conspiracy as they didn't want to further American secession and decided to ignore Burr's demands. Burr and Mary continued to meet for some time until Mary was called back to Britain, effectively ending British involvement in the conspiracy. But Burr wasn't done yet. Now, before I get any further into the conspiracy, I have to address one thing. Where is Texas in all of this? Well, in 1805, Burr announced he would be emigrating west as he had bought and intended to farm 40,000 acres of Spanish Texas that had been leased to him by the Spanish crown, which he would incorporate into his new country, though Texas would sadly not see a single speck of the conspiracy other than by name. But to continue our story, Burr would continue his plan by traveling to the Louisiana Territory via the Ohio River. He would later meet up with Herman Blennerhassett, who provided him with financial support and lent him an island he owned on the Ohio River that they used for storage space for men and supplies that would be used throughout the conspiracy. He would later turn his attention to the Spanish, where he would meet with a group of criollos in New Orleans whose objective was to conquer Mexico. He would also be approached by a Spanish diplomat to not only secure a part of the Americas, but also take Washington, D.C., paying him a few $1,000s to get it done. However, reports began to surface about Burr's plans and first appeared in newspaper reports in August of 1805. The governor of Ohio also began to grow suspicious of the activity on the island on the Ohio River and ordered the state militia to raid the island and seize all supplies. The conspiracy officially fell apart when Wilkinson revealed Burr's plans to President Jefferson and provided evidence to support his claims. Burr surrendered to the authorities at Bayou Perry in Louisiana, but would later escape authorities out of fear of being sent to prison without a fair trial. He would later be captured on February 13, 1807 near Wakesfield, Alabama, and would be taken to Richmond, Virginia to face trial for treason. However, he was later acquitted of his actions, but out of fear of being pummeled with additional charges from different states in the Union, he fled the country and only returned in the mid-1812s, where the Burr Conspiracy seemed to be ancient history to many people. He would live out the rest of his life in New York City, with his dreams of building a grand empire under his name fading away into the far corners of American history.